Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast land of the Brewery Underground Podcast. We certainly love that people are out there listening to us today. Steve Sullivan, of course, joined by Scott Touron. And Scott, this is going to be a very cool episode, a very informative episode. You know, we talk beer a lot. We talk about breweries a lot, but we have a different path today. And I'm going to let you introduce our guest because you are doing a lot of legwork to line these two guys up.
Well, we're definitely going to learn something today. We're going to raise the IQ points of this podcast by a lot, just by having our two guests on. We've got, we're going to take this angle. We're going to have a science approach today, Steve, as far as kind of beer goes. So we have got two esteemed gentlemen here, Dr. Brett Taubman, who's the professor and director of Fermentation Sciences at Appalachian State University in Boone, North Carolina. So welcome.
Thank you.
We've also
Great to be here.
Steve, thank you for being here. We've also got one of his students, Stephen Moxley, Dean's List student, research assistant, and he graduates in May of 2025. Do I have all that right?
That sounds correct. Yep.
Until I fail him intentionally to keep him around, that is.
Keep him around?
Right. Luckily, I don't need his class to graduate, so.
Guys, welcome. This is really, really cool. We've, Steve and I have been talking about this for a few weeks, and in the last several days, really just kind of diving in and writing questions and things. It just got more and more exciting for us as we did that.
Well, cool.
So cheers.
I'm excited to be here as well.
Well, I'm starting, I don't know if anybody's got anything else to drink or anything to drink, but I'm starting with a little Inscription Rock from Hop Butcher. So cheers if anybody else has anything to drink.
I have water. I have a soccer game at 9:30 tonight.
Oh, man.
That you play in? You played in the soccer game?
Yeah, stupidly.
Keeps you in great shape, right?
I still pretend that I'm young occasionally.
There you go. Go to the soccer here. Well, I have got Rhinegeist Brewery here. It is their Blossom, and this is a wheat ale. So, hooray for Rhinegeist.
Great brewery, and we had one of our earlier graduates who was working there for quite a few years.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. Yeah. If people that listen to this podcast, they know I'm from Cincinnati originally and get up to Rhinegeist every once in a while. So, I try to drink some of their beer, on occasion. And I was up there a few weeks ago, so I was able to, pick up a couple cans and, haven't had that one yet. So certainly looking forward to it. Hey, so certainly, as we talked about, get with you guys. And I know, Dr. Taubman, you teach a lot of different things. You're, as he said, the professor and director of Fermentation Sciences at Appalachian State University. And so you teach analytical and brewing chemistry as well as introductory chemistry courses there. Can you really kind of give us an overview of what that entails? Because I have to say it's probably pretty expansive.
I have to say that that bio definitely needs to be updated on our website.
I'll bet.
I haven't taught analytical chemistry or intro chem in a few years now.
Okay.
I'm pretty much 100% fermentation courses at this point.
Yeah.
But I have taught quite a bit of quantitative analysis in my day and intro chem, instrumental chemistry. Wow. I've done it all. My background is analytical chemistry. So that's where I come from. And until, it's been a while, right? The Fermentation Sciences program has been around for a while now. But for the first many years, I was kind of still teaching chemistry courses as well as fermentation courses. Specifically the brewing courses, because that's my specialty, brewing and food fermentations. But in the last few years, we've expanded our curriculum a bit. And so I'm pretty much 100% fermentation courses at this point. Main focus is the courses, fermented meats and cheeses, and then I teach our principles of fermentation science course as well.
So this is it's a 4-year degree program in fermentation sciences. Is that right?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about what all that goes into as far as like, somebody's coming in, a student, Stephen, for example, is coming in. What exactly are they learning from the ground up?
So first, they're learning a lot of chemistry, biology, math, and statistics before they even really dive too deeply into fermentation, because those are really the foundational subjects that you need to be able to better understand fermentation. So the students have to take 2.5 years of chemistry courses, a year and a half of biology. One of those semesters includes fermentation microbiology, which we teach in our department or in our program, and then a year of math and statistics. We definitely have some intro fermentation courses, but by their junior year, after students have kind of gotten all of those foundational courses out of the way, then they can start to dive more deeply into the fermentation courses, the upper level fermentation courses. So a lot of production and analysis courses. So we have a 2-semester sequence of brewing. We have a 3-semester sequence of wine. So winery operations and analysis, principles of wine production, and viticulture. We teach fermented meats and cheeses, distillation technology. So, they can kind of pick and choose what courses they want to focus on, or if they want to kind of dabble in a lot and figure out what it is that they're really interested in, before they go into industry. So that's kind of the basic overview of our program, but it's a rigorous STEM degree, certainly. And it's no joke. I mean, students definitely have to put in the time and the effort to be able to graduate with the degree, but the good news is they're going to get a job when they graduate. So far, and we've been around since 2012, we were the first standalone fermentation sciences program in the country, and we have had 100% employment rate. So if a student wants a job in fermentation, they're going to get a job in fermentation because we have more employers seeking our graduates than we have graduates to fill those positions. Now, I know Stephen's probably looking at me askance because he has yet to secure that job, but I'm not worried about him. He's going to get that job.
I've only just started looking, so.
Stephen, I'm curious, when you first started, so when you, as Dr. Taubman talked about, when you first started in the first early days, did you have a focus at first of what you thought you wanted to do, and has that changed and evolved for you over time?
Yeah, it has. I came into App State as kind of a somewhat non-traditional student. My kind of history is I started my fermentation, interest career working as a bartender for breweries in Blacksburg, Virginia, while I was completing my technical writing degree at Virginia Tech. And in 2020 is when I was set to graduate. Of course, COVID hit that March or whatever. So I kind of pivoted to doing the brewery stuff full time. I finished my technical writing degree online, and since then, after I'd been working at the brewery for a couple of years, I kind of just wanted to do more in the industry. So just go dive deeper, get more into the science side of things. And I found the App State program. It looked like a great fit. So coming into the program, I definitely expected to, do more brewing, be kind of in the beer or at least alcohol industry. But now that I've been through the program, my horizons have been very broadened, and there's just so much that, fermentation science students can do. I've been looking at jobs in, the alcohol industry, but also in yeast companies, companies like White Labs, Omega Yeast, that make yeast for the brewing industry, Lallemand, which makes yeast for the brewing industry, but also for the biofuel industry and for pharmaceutical stuff. So there's a whole lot of stuff that I can do, and I think I'm definitely going to stay in that kind of yeast manufacturing, research and development kind of zone. That's where I'm hoping to end up anyway.
Any chance you stay on the educational side? I know Dr. Taubman would love you to stay just right there for a while. Any chance?
Sure, that is true, but I think having a full paycheck would be great in the meantime, and maybe I'm gonna get some more industry experience before I consider additional school. or anything like that.
That's fair.
So
Stephen would be great in academia. I can absolutely say that.
So, Dr. Taubman, how often do you hear what Stephen is saying in the beginning, where he goes into it, and maybe students in general, of where they thought it was just going to be this, and then all of a sudden it's become expansive and it's that for them? Like, it's really grown. I mean, how often do you hear that from students, and how proud of you are you because it's such a great program?
Almost universally is the answer to your first question. I mean, we've always sort of viewed like the beer and wine production as the carrots to draw students into the program, and then we can really show them everything that fermentation science involves, like Stephen was talking about. And even if a student, a lot of students come in, I've worked at a winery, I've worked at a brewery. I really want to, get the education so I can move up and do that. And some absolutely stick to that plan, but some just go, from beer to wine, or from wine to beer or cider or distillation. So some just kind of change their minds within one of the alcohol industries. But I think a lot, their eyes are really open to everything that fermentation entails, because, very few students come in with any sort of background in this field, and even any sort of knowledge as to what it actually entails and what industries are involved in fermentation science. So there's a lot of moving around as far as their aspirations and career goals.
When you were, Dr. Taubman, you started this program at the university. Was it a hard sell to them, or is this something they were kind of developing and you were there kind of at the same time and it just kind of worked out perfectly?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question, and it's a pretty long-winded answer. So buckle in. So I came to App in 2007. Yeah, there you go. In 2007, and a large reason for my coming to App, besides it being a beautiful campus in a beautiful area, and just a good fit for what I was looking for. There was the beginnings of a program at that time that was started by another chemistry faculty, and it was the Enology, Viticulture, and Natural Products program. So I thought, hey, this is great. I can, sort of tack on my research and my background onto this and start teaching brewing classes. And I came, and it wasn't as sort of developed as I thought it was, or maybe I was sold as it was when I came. But anyway, the faculty who developed that, he never took it to the state level to get it approved by the state, so it could actually be a degree granting program. And there were a number of other issues related to that nascent program. So long story very short, that faculty member eventually left with some urging from the administration. And so I worked with the dean at the time to bring in another faculty member, to hire a new faculty member. And he and I worked to develop what ultimately became the Fermentation Sciences program. And so, for those 5 or so years, that's how long it took us. I mean, he came, I think in like 2010 was when this second faculty came. So it took us a couple years to develop the curriculum, develop the program, and get all the approvals all the way up to the state. So by 2012, that's when we became an official degree granting program. And we were one of the only standalone programs in the College of Arts and Sciences. So we didn't have a home department. I mean, my home department was chemistry. I was hired as chemistry faculty. So I had a home department, but the program did not. And that was how it was for the next 6 years. And we thought that fermentation was going to become its own department. But then I think at the last minute, the administration decided, well, that's kind of a waste of resources. Let's just fold you into an existing department. I think that made more sense to them from a resource perspective, and I get it. So chemistry was the natural choice, and that's when we joined the chemistry department and became the Department of Chemistry and Fermentation Sciences.
Awesome. Stephen, what does an exam look like in this program. And I'm sure they're different at the beginning, like that first year and a half he was talking about versus say the last 2.5 years or whatever.
Yeah, well, the first exams are with all the chemistry and math. Those are just about as normal as any other college exam you can imagine. So,
Yeah.
but the fun ones are like the ones that I got to do in brewing science. We had less exams and more projects. It was more project based. But we did have also like off flavor tasting as well. So that was kind of a way that we could learn some of the faults that happen with beer and wine. We did the same thing in the wine class. And we would be, tested on our knowledge of, off flavors and, what kinds of things could have gone wrong in a particular beer. So at the end of the day, we were drinking some pretty awful tasting beers. So it wasn't exactly a great time, but it was a very interesting experience. When we got to drink the good beers, that wasn't, material we were tested on, thankfully. Because
I was going to ask you that. Do you remember like the first beer that you made or the first beer style that you made? We'll go with the first one. Can you remember the first one that you made that you liked and that was good? And the one you were just like, no, I'm checking out on this one.
Like the one that I made from like class or from Eastern Divide where I worked?
Yeah.
I think I would have to say my favorite beer style that I like to make is Bock. So it's like, strong German lager. I'm sure you're, familiar with the style. I've even got the Dead Guy Ale Maibach poster up on my wall over here.
See him.
Yeah, from Rogue. And so that was my first beer that I tried to make at Eastern Divide when I worked there, and it came out pretty okay. Definitely needed some tweaks. And we didn't have a pilot system at Eastern Divide, so I kind of just had to commit to a 10-barrel batch and kind of send it. So luckily I had some great instruction from the head brewer at Eastern Divide, Brandon Roberson, who, was kind of my mentor when I was working there. And it worked out, and, we tweaked it into a recipe that I was really proud of. And I would say my least successful beer from Eastern Divide was what was the base style? I think it was a porter, but it was like a spicy, like jalapeno beer that was just so spicy. It was like almost hot sauce. It was very difficult to drink because there was just too much hot peppers in there, and I don't even remember. I know we were giving it a lot of it to the kitchen to actually use in a sauce to kind of help use it up and stuff. Yeah. But definitely would have been a good place for a pilot system and practice batch before we bought all those peppers and processed them into the beer. But it was a learning experience, and it was still a good beer. It was just really off the deep end as far as, general audience acceptability. So
one of those ingredients where a little bit goes a long way.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We learned that lesson very fast. So
yeah.
I'm not sure if they brewed that one again.
You probably heard of the term Cicerone and know what that is. In your education here, is that something you will pursue probably down there, or is it something you're pursuing in parallel with going to school at App State?
Starting here, I definitely thought that would be like something I wanted to pursue, and even if it wasn't, I knew it wasn't like part of the curriculum per se, but I figured that it was something that I would still kind of want to pursue. But now that I'm kind of in the zone of more, kind of shooting for kind of, back of house, as it were, for the brewing industry with more of the yeast processing and stuff like that, I don't know if it's something that I'm going to follow up on, just because, for the yeast jobs, the research and development stuff, it's more analytical based and less, like consumer facing. So I don't think it's something I'm going to do, but I definitely have looked at it. And when I started at App State, I thought that it would be something I did, but it just isn't really what I'm going to need for my career.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Dr. Taubman, when you were building out, and I'm talking like logistically, right? You guys are building out a building, you get a space, you're buying equipment, you're getting equipment. How do you know, and who do you go to? How do you know who to go to get equipment? And kind of who is it? You know what I mean? Because it's like you don't just get on Amazon and start buying stuff up. You need the proper. Maybe you do.
Yeah.
You consult with to help you
not
out.
anymore because Amazon's like verboten at the university now. We're not allowed to use our university emails and have an Amazon account anymore. But yeah, again, more interesting stories. So our first home was in the bottom floor of the Broyhill Inn and Conference Center, which was a really cool venue, sort of at the highest point on campus. In Boone's up in the mountains, it's beautiful. And this was the highest point on campus. It had a beautiful lawn that you walked out onto. It was a wedding venue that was often used by alumni. So it was a cool venue, but it was also a little long in the tooth. And they weren't really maintaining it any longer. So there was a lot of duct tape and baling wire the first several years. And that, kind of went because in academia, it's not like you have investors, or you can take out a loan from the bank. So, I mean, I use startup and grant money and all kinds of different pots of money to kind of cobble together different pieces of equipment over time. Around 2016, 17 is when we moved to our current facility. And that is so it's kind of an odd location too. It's just off campus, but still, right in the heart of town and 5-minute walk to campus. But it's in an old hotel that was converted to student housing. But that old hotel, it was like an old Sheraton, I think, at first, and then it was a Quality Inn for many years. But it was a, traditional old hotel that had the big commercial kitchen. It had a bar in there. And so the space that we were given in that building was the old commercial kitchen space and some of the bar space and conference room space. And so it was, not a horrible space for us to, spec out. And just, dig some trench drains in there, run our glycol loop. And at that point, we had some funds that we could put toward equipment, but not many. And it's the constant struggle in academia that you're just constantly trying to cobble together funds as you can. One thing that we did early on, which I think was a pretty good move on our part, was to start a private nonprofit. And that allowed us to raise revenue external to the university. So we could collaborate with, different industry folks, breweries, wineries, distilleries, and, raise revenues that way. And then the university wouldn't have to worry about any alcohol laws, that type of thing. We also started, as soon as I came in 2007, I started the High Country Beer Fest, which is our big annual fundraiser. So we're on the 18th year this year. So we're finally legal. But that, and Ivory Tower hosts that. That's our private nonprofit. So again, it's a way to generate revenue external to the university. And then I just reverse launder that money into the program. So I can raise this money external to the university and then just donate that money to the university. So since about 2012, which is when we started that nonprofit, I've donated over $1 million to the university at this point.
Wow.
And that has been a huge boon to our program and a way that we can buy a lot of the equipment that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to purchase if we were only relying on state funds, for example, or on federal grant money, things like that. But I mean, that money has been critical to our success as well. Our 400-liter hybrid column pot still was purchased with an ARC federal grant, so Appalachian Regional Commission, so that we could teach distillation technology to the world. So we certainly have benefited from grant money and state money, but we have raised a lot of our own revenue as well, which has been really helpful to our program.
Has this gone to help? I know you have like your research and analytical service laboratory is one of the things you have there. Has that really gone in to help that, and how has that helped? Both of you can talk about how that really has helped in this whole process.
And the Ivory Tower funds, because we also have an Ivory Tower fund in the university, so that's a lot less encumbered than state funds, for example. So that allows us a lot of flexibility and allows us to pay research students, for example. So a lot of the stipends that Stephen has gotten for doing his research has come from that Ivory Tower fund.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so it's certainly helped in that regard. And then the service lab also helps to support the program. So that's a mechanism within the university that we use to raise revenue. And we're one of the only academic units on campus that actually is revenue generating too. And so, the administration appreciates that, I think. But that money that we raise from the service lab providing analytical services to the fermented beverage industries, that money goes to pay part of our lab manager's salary, pays for more equipment and materials. It pays for students to work in the service lab so they can both gain experience doing these critical analyses that are required in these industries and also earn money at the same time.
So you really are self-sufficient.
Unfortunately, yes, to a lot. I mean, it's a blessing and a curse, because we have been somewhat the victims of our own success, where, now the university can be like, oh, but look how entrepreneurial they are. Isn't that great? Less of a budget now.
Yeah. They've sent you off on your own now, and you got to make your own way kind of thing.
Right, exactly. Thanks.
But
it is nice.
Yeah. Stephen, that research laboratory, how crucial has that been for your overall learning and what you want to do?
I think the lab experience I've gotten at App has been the most valuable part of all of it. Of course, the classwork and, the fundamental knowledge is important, and I learned a lot in the classes as well. But between the research that I've been doing with Dr. Guntiembo, but also the service lab that we were just talking about, the service lab in particular is such a good option for students, because a lot of those assays and analyses that you're doing on product are the same things that you'd be doing in a quality lab for a big brewery. So you're learning, right, like the exact same things that you would be, in a future job, and that's super helpful. So I think that, I'm always trying to convince other students to, get that research experience and, lab experience with Dan and the service lab, just because it's really what employers are looking for, having that hands-on, knowledge.
Dr. Taubman, do you know how many people have graduated from your program over the years? You don't have a total or anything, do you?
I should know that, but it's definitely been, I don't know, I'd say a few hundred at this point.
Yeah.
About 12 plus years of graduates at this point. And, we graduate, our numbers probably peaked in the sort of mid to late teens, 20 teens. And that was, a big part of the, craft brewing, just popularity, that and craft wine and distillation, that really drove our enrollment for several years there. And so, we were graduating probably a couple dozen students, every spring for a few years there. Now we're more like probably 10 to 15 students a year, somewhere in there. So yeah, over the years, it certainly adds up. It's definitely been a couple hundred plus, I think, at this point.
But you had mentioned earlier in the podcast that basically it's almost a 100% rate that when your students graduate, they're going to go off and they're going to do something. And, it seems like it's kind of very expansive, where maybe you want to go off and work at a brewery or be in the winery industry, but maybe you want to go work for, say, the Food and Drug Administration? Is that something that you see some of your students getting interested in as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how many have gone on to work in federal labs, for example, but a lot have gone on to work in like pharmaceutical type labs, and similar to positions to what Stephen is interested in, but also even more pharmaceutical based. And a lot of students start out in like the brewing industry, for example, and do that for a few years. And I mean, as you two are, I'm sure, aware, the craft brewing industry especially is very physically intensive. And we make that abundantly clear to our students. And, when they, do their internships or, even brewing in our facility, I think they quickly realize that. So I think a lot, after working a few years or several years in like the brewing industry, they're ready for a change at that point. Something that's a little easier on the back, maybe a little nicer on the bank account, a little more family oriented. So I'd say not a lot go into those industries directly, but we have a lot of students that end up in those industries, certainly because they have the background and the experience to step right into those industries.
Yeah.
We've learned by talking to a lot of breweries over the past year that cleanliness is priority number one. I see Stephen shaking his head. Yeah. And to what you were just talking about, Dr. Taubman, it's like you got to clean those grains, right? They got to be scooped out. All that stuff that's not fun. That's the majority of what a brewer kind of does, right? It's in the scheme of a day.
Yeah, it's 90% cleaning and sanitation, 50% backbreaking work, and 10% actually brewing. And I'm sure those numbers add up to 100%. But I mean, you get my point, right? I mean, it's so much cleaning and sanitation. And then, the work that you're doing when you're brewing, I'm using air quotes right now for those of you who are not watching the video, is actually, humping grain up the brew deck or hops or whatever to the grain to the mill. It's a lot of physical work, and the actual like brewing that you're doing is really not that much of your job in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, we had someone on, and a brewer on, and one of his employees wouldn't tell his girlfriend when he went home how much cleaning he did at work so that he didn't have to do it when he went home. She was like, oh, you're capable of doing that? Well, you can do it at home too.
That's what I was going to say. He should have told her how much cleaning he was doing at work, because then maybe she'd feel bad for him and wouldn't make him do it at home.
So I want to put Scott on the spot a little bit, because Scott is a home brewer, and I'm curious as to what would Scott not know being a home brewer that he could find out and make his beer even better if he were to go through your program.
So are you putting Scott on the spot or me on the spot?
I'm putting Scott on the spot.
Well, I mean, I don't know what I don't know, so I would.
So one way to get at least a quick synopsis of what you would learn in the 4-year degree, or at least in the 2-semester sequence, the brewing sequence, is we do offer a 1-week intensive brewing short course over the summer. And that is for people like Scott, who are avid homebrewers and maybe want to take it to the professional level, or folks who are already in the industry and maybe they're just working in packaging or they're in the cellar and they want to move up to the brew deck. That's kind of what that brewing intensive short course is geared toward. So, hey, if you guys are interested, we got spots for you.
There you go, Scott.
So in that short course, if I were to roll in there, what do you think that I would pick up on that I probably don't know brewing in the garage?
Yeah. So, I mean, number one, a lot of the chemistry. I'm sure you know how to produce certain flavors, but you would learn why you get those flavors, why you get certain off flavors, how to correct certain flavors, things like that. A lot about the process and process controls in general. And then a lot of microbiology.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that's one of the main things that a lot of even avid homebrewers are lacking, is that microbiology knowledge. And how to really, I mean, microbes, I'm a chemist, so I certainly don't claim to be an expert in microbiology myself. And I've learned a ton over the last, couple decades. working in the field. But, even talking to my colleague, Fularna Gintayimbo, who Stephen works for, who is a PhD microbiologist, his knowledge in that realm is just so far beyond mine.
There's so much to learn about yeast.
Yep. Yeah. And other microbes
and everything else. Yeah.
Stephen, it was, matter of fact, it was during a podcast Dr. Taubman was on, kind of in midway point, there was a kind of a feature on you. And you were talking about being kind of in the mountains or out in the woods and just collecting samples of things and picking up like microbes and different yeasts and things like that. Is that kind of what you're referring to and what you're talking about? Like that's what you want to do?
Yeah. I mean, that research that I was talking about on the Appalachian State podcast, that's what I'm working on now with Dr. Gintayimbo. And yeah, what we're doing is, like I mentioned there, is looking for, native Appalachian yeast strains that could be useful in beer making. So whether they have, cool flavors that could be beneficial, or that they make acid, so that you can like sour your beer with just the yeast without having to use bacteria, or if they're maltose negative, so you can make non-alcoholic beer. There's just so much, microbial diversity out there that is just kind of like a reservoir for new flavors, new potential, products. So that's kind of what we're focused on. But yeah, the first part of that, project was just collecting all the samples. So we looked up, based on some, previous, literature research in the field, we got some targets, which was, oak bark and oak soil, like soil near oak trees, and then also, swabs of like flowers and fruits, just kind of anywhere you would kind of think that yeast would be in the wild. They like sugar, they like the sugar in the beer, so looking for higher sugar areas, and the environment is probably where you'll find them. And it was a lot of kind of just going out and going on the Blue Ridge Parkway or in hiking trails and just finding what I could collect. And now I'm in the process of identifying everything, so slowly but surely.
Can you take those back and kind of grow them too, or is that another step along the way?
Yeah, so the process was basically, I took the sample material, whatever it was, maybe it's a piece of bark or, like a cotton swab on a fruit or something. And, that I used to plate onto like a kind of a general purpose growth medium. And then anything that looked like yeast that grew, I isolated and then made cultures of that. And it's in our deep freezer. So we can, call upon that, we can, use it for future experiments or whatever. But, I, isolated the DNA from all of those, isolates, and then we're kind of in the process of analyzing that DNA. So, yeah.
I can see why you want to go down that path. It sounds really cool. I mean, it really does.
It's a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah.
And I guess there's not a guaranteed success rate there, but when you do have that success, I mean, what kind of a day has that got to be for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the dream. Like, I don't know if y'all are familiar with the Philly sour yeast strain. Have you heard of this before? So it's a Saccharomyces cerevisiae is the scientific name of ale yeast. So that's just what most brewers use. And it's a different yeast species that's in a different family. I don't remember the exact scientific name at this point.
I think it's Lachantia thermotolerans, isn't it?
Okay, yeah, it's a Lachantia.
My friend Matt Farber, who discovered it, is probably like freaking out right now if I got that wrong.
But yeah, in any case, that yeast was isolated off of like a gravestone, right? In
a graveyard.
In a graveyard, maybe Philly, not on a gravestone, but yeah, in Philadelphia. So it was just an environmental sample that was isolated, and it turns out it's a really useful yeast for the brewing industry because it makes lactic acid. So as it ferments the sugar and produces ethanol, it also is making this acid. So in one step with one organism, you're getting both ethanol and, the sourness for your sour ale or whatever. So you can avoid having to use, bacterial methods which take a lot of time and, can be kind of risky if you aren't 100% spot on getting that bacteria back out of your brew house. What we're hoping to do is find something as cool as that. So
you potentially could find something that wasn't discovered before. You could discover something out there too at the same time.
It's
right?
possible. I mean,
who knew I could go out in the backyard and find something that's just groundbreaking?
Yeah, I mean that's where they're at. It's just in the environment. I mean, it's not possible. I mean, we might not find something that's like super useful, but it's likely that we'll find something undiscovered. I mean, that happens all the time.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many microbes out there and so many that have not been discovered yet. And a lot of them are because, maybe people have encountered them, but not used the right media to actually grow those microbes. And so they didn't even grow. Didn't even know that they had those microbes.
Right.
And that's really where I see the innovation coming from in the brewing industry, because for so long we've used those two yeast species, Saccharomyces cerevisiae and Saccharomyces pastorianus, for ale and lager yeast respectively. But there's so many more microbes that we could be using for beer production. I think the sky's really the limit. And that's where we're going to see the innovation in the next decade or so.
That's amazing. That's fascinating. Steve, you'll be out there chopping trees down and ripping bark off it.
Yep.
Trying to find stuff.
Going around the world looking for yeast.
That concludes part 1 of our interview with Dr. Brett Taubman and Stephen Moxley of Appalachian State University, their Fermentation Sciences program. We will be back with part 2 really soon. For Scott Touron, I'm Steve Sullivan, and this has been the Brewery Underground Podcast.